Joining our discussion now, Congressman Raja Krishnamoorthi, a Democrat from Illinois who sits on the House Intelligence Committee and the House Oversight Committee. Also with us, William Yeomans, who spent 26 years at the Department of Justice, knows their procedures inside out, was a former chief counsel to the Senate Judiciary Committee, and now serves as a senior fellow at the Alliance for Justice. And Congressman, I want to go to what we are now hearing from the Justice Department today, apparently saying you will have this report in weeks.
Well, I think that we need full transparency, especially after what we saw in the Barr summary. The American people want the Mueller report. They don't want the Barr report. And the fact that they have been holding this back just begs the question, why? What's in there that they don't want us to see readily?
And I want to go to Bill Yeomans, with your experience in the Justice Department. The reason I wanted to talk to you about this tonight is there's been so much questioning of procedurally how this has worked and how it has worked with the Attorney General. And we have George Conway today writing an op-ed piece about this, married, of course, to a staffer in the White House. And George Conway says that because the Barr letter about the Mueller report says that it contains evidence that has never been made public in any way about obstruction of justice, that's an example of exactly what the public needs to know to evaluate the full impact of this report.
Well, absolutely. I think the public needs to see the report in full. And, you know, obviously, there are some hurdles. They say it's going to take weeks. We'll see. They need to deal with the grand jury material. They need to deal with any classified information. It's not clear that there is classified information. But they also apparently are going to send it to the White House for review for executive privilege. And that's a step that I think is going to be incredibly important and could slow the process down. I hope it doesn't.
And let's go over, what do you consider the appropriate kind of review that the Attorney General should conduct of this report before making it public?
Well, I think what the Attorney General should do is go to court and get an order to allow the grand jury material to be disclosed to Congress. That's been done in the past, and it can be done here. I think that the executive privilege part of this should be taken care of very quickly. The president should waive executive privilege. He has said that he wants to get the report out. He sees it as complete vindication. If that's true, then he shouldn't want to assert executive privilege. So the scrubbing of the report should go fairly quickly, and if they get a court order, which they can do in very short order, this can all be done soon.
Well, of course, Congressman, President Trump has said just about everything on the release of the report. He said, as Bill Yeomans just said, he has in the past said, yes, they should release it. Now, today, he's saying it's completely up to the Attorney General.
Right. He's trying to have his cake and eat it, too. On the one hand, he knows that the American people demand transparency. They will respect the conclusions of Bob Mueller, but they want to see the report. They want to see the underlying findings and materials. On the other hand, there's stuff in there that, for some reason, is making him uncomfortable with releasing it. You know, I think that's precisely why the American people should see this report, especially when, with regard to obstruction of justice issues, he was not exonerated, regardless of you know, how many tweets he puts in all caps. He was not exonerated by this particular Mueller report.
Congressman, do you want to hear from Robert Mueller in testimony in at least one of the House committees?
I personally would like to hear him. I think that Chairman Schiff has indicated that Mr. Mueller may come before the Intelligence Committee at some point, if for no other reason than to talk about counterintelligence issues, which may not have to do with the criminal probe per se, but which have to do with, you know, basically whether people were compromised and to what extent they were compromised and maybe subject to leverage by our adversaries. At the end of the day, we have to all join hands to protect our national security for sure. Has
Congressman Schiff indicated whether that kind of hearing could be public, or whether you would, or could it perhaps be one of those hearings where you have the public version and then at the end of it you do a couple of hours in closed session?
He did not indicate that, although obviously there'd be intense public interest in what Mr. Mueller has to say. And so I'm sure that Chairman Schiff would probably be weighing the different considerations here for sure.
Bill Yeomans, one of the issues that actually were raised Sunday night when the Attorney General's letter just came out was a very simple thing. How many pages is the report? And in the Attorney General's letter, he could have easily said in the first sentence, I've received a 506-page report from the law. He doesn't tell us how big it is. But if it takes weeks, 3 weeks, let's say, to review this report to decide what of it can be made public, does that give you a sense of how big this report is, how much they're wrestling with there?
Well, I think it must be substantial. I mean, it wouldn't take that long otherwise. But you know, my concern is that we're in a situation now where we have the Barr spin on the Mueller report, and that's out there being used by the president and his supporters as a political triumph. And I suspect that the report is going to be much more damaging for the president than they are letting on at this point. And so I'm not sure how much of a hurry the White House is to get the report out. I think they want to enjoy what they are considering their triumph for a while longer. So I was heartened by the polling numbers that you were citing, that there should be public pressure on the White House and on the Department of Justice to produce this thing. But to answer your first question, I think it probably is substantial, but we just don't know. And we don't know when we finally get it. I hope it's very clear what has been left in and what's been taken out, and I hope nothing's been taken out. But if something is, I hope we can see what that is.
Congressman, before you go, let me ask you about the breaking news of the hour, which is that the Attorney General apparently, according to Politico in a report tonight, opposed the orders basically from the White House to switch sides in the litigation on the Affordable Care Act. And now the Attorney General and the Justice Department are in court basically trying to destroy and eliminate the Affordable Care Act in court. Your reaction to that?
I think that this was a horrible decision by the Trump administration. As you might recall, the original lawsuit actually was something that the Trump administration supported, and to the extent that it would remove protections for people with pre-existing conditions. Now they've taken the position that the entire Affordable Care Act should be struck down. Not only the protections for people with pre-existing conditions, but Medicaid, expanded Medicaid for millions of people, subsidies for another group of millions of people who receive it under Obamacare, and then, of course, all the other protections, whether it's protections for dependent children to be able to stay on their parents' plan up to the age of 26, lifetime limits on health care expenses, and so forth. This is something that will be totally opposed by the American people, and indeed that's what helped elect us to the majority last fall. The concern that the Affordable Care Act would be struck down and there would be no replacement for it. And that's exactly what the Trump administration is reiterating its position.